Good morning. Welcome to our workshop today. Another Saturday workshop. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Very fascinating topic today, one of my favorite topics. My name is Charles Sine, CEO of Anti-Fragility Health. We run this every day, every Saturday, and you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, at Anti-Fragility Health. So love us, like us, and I hope you enjoy the workshop today. So as usual, I normally start with the workshop series that we run. It's really focused around longevity. And what's longevity? It's about health span, lifespan, how long you live and how healthy that life is. All of us want to live a long and healthy life, so it's really important we refocus on that issue, and that is what then drives all the actions and everything that we're going to talk about and that we talk about in our workshops. So we look at what are the implementation drivers for this kind of lifestyle. It's really around building physiological resilience and metabolic reserve. That's really what we're trying to do. And it takes us a level below that and say what's physiological resilience is that we can survive. And secondly, we have enough resources to support that survival. That's really key. Any war, anything, that's what we do. We're going on the road. We want to make sure we arrive, but we want to make sure we have, in case something goes wrong, we have the reserves, right? Good planning, good project managers. So we're running off our lives. It's a critical issue. So let's look at some of the things that support physiological resilience and metabolic reserve. Number one is lifestyle, right? Even though we inherited genes, the impact of our lifestyle, which is what we call epigenetics, really drives the length of our lives and the healthy lives we live. So it's really important. We talk about lifestyles and we look at different things. We'll be mentioning some of them today as we talk about the cardiometabolic imbalance driven by inflammation. Secondly, there's signals. God has given us signals, and as research begins to increase, we're calling them biomarkers or measurements, things that allow us to measure and be able to discuss imbalance or balance, right? Very important. I tend to focus on the imbalance side because the bad news is more important than good news, but especially when it comes to our health, especially in architecture where we're driven towards sickness rather than wellness. But so our focus on measurement is really critical because it really tells us where we are. Because otherwise, just if we go by how we feel good until we get a heart attack. So that's not a good measure, how you feel. The underlying measures that we get from the clinical areas, and we'll be talking about some of that, are more critical signals because they give us the early warning, what we call really the AWACS, the early warning signals of what's coming. And those signals are really, really critical and very important. Thank you. Yeah, could you put it down? Thank you. I appreciate that, Dinah. So really, really important that we focus on lifestyle signals. But the third area is mindset. I was talking to one of our customers today about the desire, the will, the willingness, the passion to have a good and amazing life. The passion, we need that because that's what drives you in the long game. It's a tough journey. We're living to 120, 140. It requires a lot of drive to get up every morning for 120 years, right? It's a long game. So this is not a short game. So you need the right mindset. If you're going to give up, well, then this journey is going to end badly. So mindset really critical, a desire to focus for a long life. But let's go to the central theme of what we're talking about over the next couple of weeks. We started last week with cardiometabolic imbalances, and for the next 4 weeks, 3 weeks, that's what we'll be covering. Today, last week we were talking about the HDL, LDL, this whole cholesterol argument, or triglycerides. It's HDL, LDL, what is good and what is not good. And we covered that extensively, and I might mention some of that today because, it's really important that we understand this LDL, HDL. They are both good for us. The question is, are they in the right amounts? What are LDL? LDLs are lipoproteins, the smaller ones, that carry cholesterol from the blood into the tissue. It's really a critical function because they can go into the tissue, the fiber layers, to provide cholesterol or fat that is required for mitochondrial performance, which is ATP. So the fat goes there and we use that for energy, just as the sugar goes there. But the fat architecture is a critical architecture for cardiometabolic balance. We'll talk about the sugar one later, but let's focus on fat, right? And so that's what we spoke about. And HDL is the big boy. It's the one that carries it to the liver, back to the liver when the cholesterol is exhausted or there's excess that's put by in the bloodstream. HDL carries it back to the liver and also carries it from the liver to the bloodstream for LDL to do its work. So the two of them are working hand in hand. So when we have high LDL in the bloodstream, it's telling us something is wrong, because LDL should be low in the bloodstream since it should be in the tissue. And when we have the right HDL amount in the bloodstream, then we're happy, because the big truckers are carrying cholesterol back to the liver or taking it to the bloodstream for LDL to take it to the tissue. Really important you understand that. So those measures of cholesterol is a good thing. We just don't want it sitting in the bloodstream. That's the critical issue. Today we're going to talk about inflammation. I'm not going to spend more time on that because that's what the rest of the class is going to be about. But next week we're going to talk about metabolic contribution to cardio, which is really about sugar metabolism, right? And then finally, I've made some changes here. In the last week or in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about oxidative stress, right? Around the issues of mitochondrial energy production and how that really affects cardiometabolic health. So let's get on with inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing. God gave us inflammation because it is the beacon call. We have an attack. And therefore, the body rallies the resources. So there are two parts to inflammation: initiation, the call, and resolution. So to achieve homeostasis, because if there's no resolution to that initiation, then the body is out of balance. Homeostasis is getting the body back to normalcy. But we live in a culture now where so many drivers are driving the initiation but not the resolution. And we know where those drivers are coming from bad diet, from too much sugar in our diet. We're eating sugar in the morning, afternoon, and dinner. Too much the wrong fats, the trans fats, giving us a lot of omega-6 rather than the required omega-3, which is optimized. The wrong kind of phospholipids that lines the arterial walls and things. Infections for the mouth, for the gut, and the urinary tract area, persistent infections in those areas. All of these things drive a continuous inflammatory architecture, which leads to chronic inflammation. This is really important we get that. So that's why when we attack inflammation, we have to attack the initiators of inflammation. We have to go to the source. We have to resolve infections. We have to resolve allergies. We have to resolve sugar in the diet. That's why we exercise. We want to push the sugar and the cholesterol into the tissue. That is really what exercise is for. You want to push sugar and cholesterol into the tissue, out of the bloodstream, right? Sleep calms the overall body because our brains can't go to rest. They're always eager, and the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems also create some level of calm. Balancing the hormones also, right, reduces that overall inflammatory architecture. So this is at the heart of chronic illness, inflammation, one of the 2 or 3 drivers of chronic illness. And so it's really important we understand inflammation. It's not something that you see, right, or you hear, but if you cut yourself, you can see the swelling and then the healing that happens, and then returns to normalcy. Sometimes leaves a scar, sometimes fully resolves because of using all the resources, the metabolic reserve. That's why if a young child has a cut, easily resolves, no scar. You're older, you have a cut, doesn't resolve that easily because you don't have a lot of the metabolic results in stem cells and exosomes that are required for full resolution of that initiator. So let's talk about chronic inflammation and how it presents itself in terms of chronic illness, right? So we have inflammation, chronic, we have vascular inflammation. And I'm going to show you a picture of that vascular inflammation, how the LDL and HDL in the blood, in the arterial walls, can lead to inflammation, right? How inflammation increases heart disease risk. But let's look at what really triggers that inflammation. You see, the sugar in the blood is wounding the arterial wall. And that causes vascular inflammation. And then the body wants to deposit cholesterol on the wounded arterial wall, leading ultimately to blockage and plaque. Very, very important we understand that. The source of high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, it's really an inflammatory response by wounding of the arterial wall that's caused by sugar in the blood and other things, pathogens and other things that will cause that wounding. Let's look at neuroinflammation, right? When these antigens or pathogens escape from the bloodstream into the blood-brain barrier, they trigger neurological inflammation. That's why addressing gut architecture balances with pathogens is really important, because those viruses can penetrate through the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and they cause what we call neuroinflammation, which is really what leads to a lot of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other things. They trigger because as that inflammation continues, right, the release of tau and the other proteins is a response to that persistent attack in the brain or neural architecture. Adipose inflammation, that's fat. We know that fat causes inflammation because what is inside the fat really accumulation, especially visceral fat, is the body's way of storing toxic and other heavy metals so that they are not released. Those toxins are not available in the bloodstream to kill us or make us sick. And so in itself, it triggers inflammation. There's hepatic, which is the liver and the kidney stuff. And then there's the joint inflammation we all complain about, arthritis, pain, right? And these are all inflammatory things that lead to a lot of illnesses. So if we look at this collection, there's one there also, the GI, the big one, that leads to Crohn's and colon cancer and all those issues, which is why we recommend that about 40, 45, you should do a colonoscopy almost every 3 to 5 years, because the gut colon cancer is a very common cancer, and caught early it can be healed, but very dangerous if it's caught late. So, right, we all know that inflammatory signals drive cancer, right? So it's really important because there is cancer around all these areas, which is almost like the end stages of chronic illness expression that leads to significant cellular dysfunction, right? So what are the interesting biomarkers, inflammatory biomarkers for us to look at? Very interesting. But one of the most important is imaging, right? Imaging will show us the accumulation of, say, cholesterol or blockages, right? That's why we do CT scans, and it could also show us cellular malfunction and different things. So imaging, especially for plaque, is a very important indicator when we do the carotid scan, which are the big arteries that come out and they curve to then go to the brain and other parts of the body, right? So we scan that because we want to see in that curvature, as the blood is rushing, how much accumulation is happening there. It is then an indication, an early indication of plaque formation across the body, or of blood pressure in the lower extremities. So most people who already have blockage would then have lower extremity challenges, which is really one of the problems of erectile dysfunction, right? If blood is not flowing and properly to your lower extremities, then blood is not flowing to your penis, and that's the source of erectile dysfunction. So let's look at a lot of these protein markers in blood, and that's why I love Boston Heart Diagnostics, because it captures all these biomarkers for inflammation in a beautiful looking chart, right? So MPO is the marker of a blockage forming or breaking, MPO. That's a protein that's released by white blood cells. And what are white blood cells? They're lymphocytes. They're the ones who respond when there is an infection or inflammation. So when you have white blood cells responding and shedding these proteins into the bloodstream, it is an indicator to us that there are significant issues going on. So we also look at LPPLA. It's also a protein that is released by white blood cells as they respond. It's actually a marker of a blockage forming, cracking, or shifting. Really, really important. As you know, these are the things that cause strokes and serious challenges, right? So this is a marker of a blockage forming or breaking, MPO. And this is a marker of a blockage forming, cracking, or shifting, which then might release little particles of that blockage material, plaque, which would then block, and that's what causes dysfunction. That's what causes myocardial infarction or other things that arise from that. Then we have HSCRP, another protein. That one is a marker of inflammation, just a straight marker. And we have fibrinogen, which is also a marker of early inflammation. So these are all things that we can look at. But then I added my really beautiful one there. That is the most one I worry about. LP(a) is a genetic inheritance of blockage that we really need to understand. And you always want to keep that. So if you inherited a bad number, you want to make sure you really pay attention, because it's an early and a genetic indicator for heart attack and heart risk. Really important markers. So these markers, as we call them, signals, are really important that we understand them, and therefore we can take appropriate action. So now let's move to, so what do you do about it? Charles, you've been frightening us with all this inflammation talk. So what do we need to do about it? So let's look at my intervention architecture, which is really what we do at the clinic here. So our strategies for intervention here is around 3 areas: prevention, reversal, and optimization. So prevention, it's really all about your lifestyle. You are in control of that. Infections, if you always have infections, you need to deal with it. That's why we sell very good toothpaste. You have to make sure you wash your mouth at least twice a day, in the morning and at night, and that you also use the gel, because the mouth is the source of most infections and chronic illness in the body. Oral dental hygiene is a critical issue. What are the other areas of infection? The mouth. Oh, I don't have the toothpaste here. The GI tract, we have compromised IBD for the GI tract. We also have the Ultra GI Replenish. But we have things here for microbial support that would allow you to address. For example, every time I feel like I have a scratchy throat, I take my CP, 3 or 10 drops of it in water, to address that underlying issue, right? So infections, and also urinary tract infections. I know a lot of people suffer from that. Antibiotics don't solve the problem, because they have they may solve it temporarily, but the inflammatory signals or the infections will return, because it's really a pathogenic imbalance. And that's why we try to solve that by using our different things here. I didn't bring it today because that's really a metabolic conversation. That's why we use probiotics and fiber to create a normalcy in that architecture. And that is a very challenging issue to resolve, because trying to repopulate the GI architecture, the mouth, the GI, and the urinary architecture, to rebalance the bacterial population in them is a very challenging issue. And as we know, infections in that area is really critical as we grow older. Number 2, sleep. You must sleep well. I sleep well with melatonin and magnesium. I take about 20 milligrams of melatonin at night, both short and long. And I also use magnesium threonate, which also calms down the mental architecture so that I can get 8 hours of good sleep. And you can measure that sleep. We have a lot of things we do around sleep here. Exercise, critical. Daily, you need to walk, you need to move. Movement is critical to give us. And what does exercise do? As I said before, it takes away the cholesterol and the sugar out of the bloodstream because you're actually using it. And you want to achieve what we call the maximum aerobic rate in terms of how you're burning calories. So let's look at diet, critical. You must stop eating sugar. You must reduce your carbohydrates and actually make choices around what we call resistant starch. So there's some starches that are good, but we need to limit the amount. We need to limit the amount of protein, and we need to eat good fat. Good fat must be got from either plants or from grass-fed or wildly caught fish. That's the only sources of good fat. And so good fat is really good for you. And that is where your diet should be moving. Something now that's the craze called ketogenic diets. But you want the Mediterranean ketogenic diet is a good balance around that. You want to eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fiber to get your phytonutrients. But on top of that, you want to do what we call the RDA, the recommended daily allowance. And so we have supplements that would give you that. For example, the GI Replenish also comes with a long list of some beautiful things that we don't find in our foods every day. So if you had this as a meal replacement, that's a very good thing. Or you could go for Inflammacore, which is focused with a lot of phytonutrients and adaptogens that calm and resolve inflammatory signals. So, and then stress, the big one, right? We all need to deal with it. So now let's look at reversal and prevention. And in this area, I spoke already about infections. So it's really, really important that if we have the infection, we work on it. If we don't have it, that's prevention. We need to make sure it doesn't come on board. But if you have it, you need to address it. And we have a lot of different things here to address the underlying infections without using antibiotics. Really important, guys. God gave us natural phytonutrients and adaptogens that can slowly resolve infections, right? We have silver saline and other things, and they will slowly change the balance of good and bad bacteria. Because when we have an infection response, it's actually the overwhelming bad bacteria overwhelming the good bacteria. So to achieve homeostasis, we want to create that right balance. God made it that way. I didn't. We just deal with it, right? You create the right balance. That's what you need to do. And to create the right balance, you get more of the good bacteria, or you wash your hands, or you wash your mouth. Those are ways of reducing bad bacteria and allowing the good bacteria at least to survive, right? Plaque reduction. We do a lot of plaque reduction. Oh yes, thank you for bringing the silver saline. These are things that you use. It's purified liquid silver, so you can use that. It helps you significantly. And the toothpaste that I used, it also comes with a gel. Very important toothpaste. Doesn't have plastic or any of the other stupid things that you find in the cheap toothpaste you buy. I know you like Costco toothpaste. Bad for you. This is expensive toothpaste, but it addresses that oral issue, reduces inflammation. You know, the periodontal disease, most Americans have it. It's the source of chronic illness. Because how many times do you swallow a day? More than 5,000 times. So all that bad bacteria, you're swallowing, messing up your GI, messing up your urinary tract. That's the source of it. Clean your mouth as regularly as you can. And you could also mouthwash with your silver saline liquid. It's pure silver, and we know silver kills bacteria. crushes them immediately, right? So you want to take that stuff. SPM, oh my SPM, our most favorite product. You must take every day. It resolves inflammation. Significant research around this. People think this should be a prescription. It's a beautiful product. Fish oil, fractionated fish oil. They've extracted the parts of fish oil that resolve inflammation. And if you resolve inflammation, then there is no chronic inflammation. So fish oil is really, and then we have a couple of other things here, inflammatone, inflammacore, and curcumin. As you all know, these are things that calm inflammation. So it's really, really important we do that. But let's move to optimization. One of the things that some people do is they have the sugar monitoring, the continuous glucose monitoring, CGMs, that we have today, because the less sugar you have in the bloodstream, the healthier you're going to be. We do a lot of chelation and plaque X. What is chelation? Chelation, we use either liquid or IV therapy chelation to remove the chronic metals. It's a kind of a detox of removing all the antioxidant, the toxins, and also removing heavy metals and all the things out of the body. And then the plaque X is a phospholipid, and it actually goes to layer. Let me show you a picture here of the phospholipids structure. If you look at that, that is a cell membrane lipid bilayer, and our plaque X is a phospholipid, a biphospholipid, and it goes to help with the relining of the cellular architecture. Very, very important that we take plaque X, IV therapy and chelation, and then we have poly-MVA, NAD, and peptides, which are all optimization solutions to address cellular integrity and reduce inflammatory signaling in the architecture. So I know I've walked through some of the difficult stuff, but you know, you can always ask me questions. You can send me love. You can also send me hate. If you don't agree with me, I love it. Have a good day and be with us, and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.